Hello, I am Mary Wollstonecraft, an 18th century philosopher. I'm so pleased to learn that you're interested in my life and ideas. I am certainly more than just my writings, but I imagine I am best known for arguing that women are fully rational creatures and must receive an education equal to men. Why? Because women should no longer be subjugated by men. And although most men I know will foolishly disagree, a robust intellectual education is necessary if women are ever to liberate themselves from the commonly held infantilizing notion, which is totally insulting, that female education today should only be concerned with making women attractive to future husbands. How revolting! Any woman who boasts of her weakness is inadequately trained for life. Women need a proper education in order to be equal partners in marriage and fulfill our domestic duties and better educate our children, thus strengthening both our families and society as a whole. My belief that women must live as intellectual and virtuous adults and not as children was largely rejected by the male leadership in my society, but women, most notably those in later generations, were inspired by my writing, and many will come to see me as one of the first feminists. But perhaps I'm getting ahead of myself. Please let me briefly tell you about my life before I highlight some of my philosophical thoughts. Then you can judge for yourself who is right, me or my critics. I was born in England as the second of 7 children born to a middle-class family with diminishing wealth and an unstable father. Unlike most girls in my situation, I was well educated at home. I studied the Bible, Shakespeare, and the ancient philosophers. As a young adult, I was a governess, ran a school for girls, and worked as a translator and reviewer for a philosophical journal, the Analytical Review, which was a highly unusual but very informative job for a woman in my day. My primary profession, however, was as a writer. In my career, I penned 2 children's books, a successful travelogue, a novel about an independent young woman, and a history of the French Revolution. I lived in France for many years and experienced both the glorious overthrow of the corrupt monarchy and the dangerous reign of terror that soon followed. I am best known, however, as the author of A Vindication of the Rights of Woman, which I published in 1772 when I was 33 years old. The book was a sequel of sorts to my 1770 publication, A Vindication of the Rights of Man, where I defended democratic principles and basic human rights. I liked my independence and lived an unconventional life for my time. I had several lovers and gave birth to 2 daughters. I imagine you probably know my youngest, Mary Shelley, the author of Frankenstein. Not content to play the role of a delicate greenhouse flower, the part expected of me by society, I accepted the pain of hunger and the ache of abandonment and faced danger and profound depression. But these experiences, as difficult as they were, taught me courage, temperance, and prudence, and made me who I am. In A Vindication of the Rights of Woman, I sharply criticized the ideas of the famous French philosopher Rousseau, who argued that the only point of female education is to make women pleasing to their husbands. I equally condemned the teachings of Dr. Gregory, a Scottish moralist who thought girls should be taught to love pretty dresses and dolls and to deny their natural strength in order to obtain their husband's affection. I absolutely reject those offensive notions and rebel against the expectation that, as a contemporary in America will one day sing in a hit Broadway show, a woman's only job is to marry rich. Instead, dear reader, notice my radical call for a change in our educational system. I argue that both boys and girls should be educated together, and that women must strengthen their minds and grow in virtue so they can properly face the challenges of life. Only then will women be emancipated from society's limiting expectations and participate as full contributing adults. As you read my book, note well my criticism of the current practice that expects women to act like children who are dependent upon their husbands. Such will not do, for society needs liberated women engaged in all parts of society. I hope my critics notice that I am not calling for women to be more like men, unless by being more masculine they mean being more dependent upon reason and human virtue and less reliant upon emotion and sentiment alone. I am willing to admit that men have greater physical strength, and I accept that both sexes have determined roles to play in society. I imagine that some later feminist philosophers might criticize me for not advocating for a greater revolution in gender roles, but I am content with letting men and women play these roles if women are no longer denied their rights to a proper education. But I do dream that society will one day radically change. Although I understand that my contemporary readers may find it laughable, I do think that women will ultimately cast off their bonds of intellectual slavery and take their right to vote. And why not? I understand that many of my critics might misunderstand the powerful but modest proposal I make in Vindication. I feel it necessary to repeat that I don't want women to act just like men. Instead, I expect that one day society will allow women to be the real human beings they are and have equal standing in society. And then these liberated women will successfully head our businesses and universities and will lead at all levels of government as fully developed, intelligent human beings. But my male contemporaries, by and large, did not take up my challenge. Instead of changing society, they preferred to criticize my life choices so they could conveniently ignore my arguments. My loving husband, some say rather foolishly, brought attention to my personal life when he praised my courage and spirit following my death in childbirth. In his memoir about our life together, he brought to light intimate details of my previous love affairs and 2 suicide attempts, ruining my reputation in the process. Tragically, these critics took my life as evidence that the education of women makes women morally deficient and unfit mothers. But in the decades that followed my death, many women, including other feminist writers and leaders in the suffragist movement in America and Europe, were inspired by my life and writing and came to see me as a leader who was ahead of her times. I'm curious what you think of my vindication. Do you agree that society will be better served if women are educated as men are today? Will you stand with me and claim girls must be allowed to develop their intellect and personal virtue and do more with their lives than simply aspire to acquire a husband? And I'm curious, which lines from my text do you agree with? Which do you think are absolutely wrong? And do you think all human society will one day adopt my philosophy? If so, what do you think convinced my critics they were wrong? If not, what's holding back such a reasonable request? So, thank you for reading my book. Keep challenging yourself and keep fighting for your fundamental right to develop your human nature through an education.